You just joined me. Fantastic. Right, it's time for the Great British Debate This Out, and I'm asking, should self-identification require a medical diagnosis? Now, this follows the decision of SNP Minister Ash Regan to resign over Nicola Sturgeon's gender recognition reform bill, which would actually allow Scots as young as 16 to change their legal gender by simply signing a declaration. Now, the bill passed its first hurdle in Holyrood yesterday. Explaining her resignation, Regan said that her conscience would not allow her to support a bill that may have negative implications for the safety and dignity of women and girls. And she's not the only one to have been so public with her opposition to the bill. Many feminists, including the author J.K. Rowling, believe that the changes pose a risk to women and girls as predatory men may abuse the system to gain access to women's spaces. So for the Great British Debate This Hour, I'm asking, should self-identification require a medical diagnosis? Well, to kick things off, I'm joined by Susan Smith, co-director of For Women Scotland, a group set up to protect and strengthen women and children's rights. Well, first of all, Susan, what is your view of the recognition of the gender recognition reform bill? I mean, is it a threat to safety, as Ash Regan claims?
Yeah, the problem with the bill as it stands is that it's opening up a process to a whole new cohort of people. There's no definitions in the bill about who this might be. They are no longer going to have to require a medical diagnosis. So in effect, anybody and everybody could apply for a gender recognition certificate. And we still haven't had clarity on what that affects in law as regards women's rights and the right to single-sex spaces and services.
Now, I mean, so presumably you applaud Ash's decision to resign over the bill. I mean, the decision will cost her, more than £30,000 a year in salary. Yeah. In your view, was that the right move for her to do that? And what would you think? What do you suggest that should be done then if this change actually happens?
It was an incredibly principled and brave stance for Ash, and as you say, it's reduced her salary by a third. So it's got a financial cost, and she will probably not be invited back, certainly by Nicola Sturgeon, anytime soon. She has been somebody who has said she's had concerns about this for a long time. She was one of 15 SNP politicians who signed a letter in 2019 saying that they had issues with the bill as it stood then, the proposed bill as it stood then. And the bill hasn't changed since then. The proposition that came before the Holyrood Parliament yesterday was pretty much exactly the same one as was touted in 2019. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise to anyone. And I think that she showed enormous integrity, and that's what we would hope and expect our politicians to have. And I would hope that some of the other politicians who have also got concerns, and we know they've got concerns, will follow her example.
Well, let's hope they don't all resign, because we need them to stand up against it. Susan, stay right there. I'm also joined by former SNP councillor Austin Sheridan, who supports the gender recognition reform bill. So, Austin, tell me why you support this bill and the reform to it.
Yeah, I support the bill because when we look at what the bill actually does, is it simply allows people to change their gender on their birth certificate. And what I tend to find is that although there may be genuine concerns when it comes to the protection of of single-sex spaces, and those are things that are covered in the 2010 Equality Act, this legislation doesn't change any of those rights enshrined in the Equality Act whatsoever. People have the right to be trans. Anyone can choose to be trans. Anyone can legally change their name, and anyone can live as a man or a woman. They don't need any medical permission to do that. So this bill, although there are concerns raised, what people are raising concerns about are already things that are legislated for. So they're looking at the completely the wrong legislation.
Yeah, but I mean, look, saying that you're trans, that's fine, but changing your sex legally is what this will mean, and you can do it without any real due process in terms of any medical, anybody medical looking over to check that you are genuine in doing that. So do you not think that it opens the pathway to people who may want to manipulate that and take advantage of the situation, Austin?
Absolutely not, because if people were going to use changing their gender to manipulate people, you don't need to legally change your gender or your sex to do that. People have the right to be trans. There is no law preventing someone living as a trans person if that is how they feel and that's how they want to live their life. What this legislation will allow them to do is change a document, which is their birth certificate. They can already change their name on their passport. You can change your name on your passport, your bank. You can live by any name you want under current legislation.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's a legal thing. Susan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is where there's a basic misunderstanding, because the Equality Act and the Gender Recognition Act do impinge upon each other, and we know that. And we know that when the GRA was originally drafted, there was something slipped in Schedule 9 that said a person's sex had changed for all legal purposes. Now, people will talk about the single sex exceptions in the Equality Act. What they do not say is that they are actually already incredibly hard to put into practice. And so I would, if this is as meaningless as advocates suggest, I would ask why this is so necessary, because what this, why does anybody frankly have to change their sex? There are rights. We have rights enshrined in law which are based upon sex. And the sex that we have, we cannot change it. It affects lots of aspects, especially of women's lives. And by doing this, I find it astonishing that people are still unaware of things like Section 22 within the GRA, which makes it almost impossible to find out if somebody has a GRA or not. You can't a GRC or not, and you can't even ask people.
GRC, could you just clarify what a GRC is for anybody who?
So a GRC is the Gender Recognition Certificate.
Oh, I see.
That allows people to legally make this legal change.
Okay.
And also I find some of the language in this incredibly sexist. How do you live as a man or a woman? And this idea that you don't have to change your gender to access women's spaces. Unfortunately, you don't. And that's part of the problem. We have got a lot of people now self-identifying their way into this. This is a huge social change. And pieces of legislation like this make it much, much harder for women to set boundaries and define their rights.
Austin, do you take that on board, that is what the problem is with this particular legislation? You've got about 30 seconds.
No, I mean, as I say, I don't see that at all, because, as I say, if we're looking at legislation that we have just now, and what's been touched upon there, is that people do have the right to identify as the gender that they wish to identify as already. This is something that people do, and then when you look at asking people to produce evidence, I mean, what circumstances are we talking about there? Are we talking about having people standing outside toilets and asking them to prove if that's their sex? I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it's not actually a major issue in countries where it's already the case, such as Ireland, Norway, and Denmark.
Well, listen, we're running out of time. This conversation can go on for a lot longer, I can tell you that. My panel will debate it. Suzanne Smith, thank you very much. She's the co-director for Women for Scotland, and Austin Sheridan, former SNP councillor. Thank you very much for talking to me this afternoon. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akwe.